Okay, 13.6. How can we use water more sustainably? Okay, so main cause of overuse is underpricing caused by government subsidies. So right now, and as I believe it should be as well, water is considered a right, and I believe water should be a right. So in order to make it accessible for everyone in the United States, water is highly subsidized, which is why we only spend about 1% of our income on water, right? Food is also highly subsidized, which is why we only spend about 2% of our income on water, right? So 3% total of our income provides us with food and water. Compare that to somebody from a third world country who spends about 10% on water and 40 to 70% on food, depending on how poor they are. So we're looking at either 50 to 80% of your income being spent on food and water in a third world country versus 3% in the United States. Because of that, there's no incentive to use less of it because it's so cheap. So we have this mindset that because something is cheap, therefore it must be plentiful, right? Economic supply and demand. So we don't use water sustainably, right? We just use it and consume it like nothing. 65% of water used worldwide is wasted through evaporation, leaks, and other losses. And when we look at different irrigation techniques, we'll examine why that number could be so high. So reducing water waste. Encourage nighttime irrigation. If you irrigate during the day, especially between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., roughly 70% of that water is lost to evaporation because it's landing on the surface of the plant. Intense sunlight causes evaporation. It never has time to make it and percolate down into the ground, into the roots of the plant, right? So discourage that time, daytime watering. We have in city of Oviedo, there's a water cop that goes around and will actually write citations if you are watering between the hours of 10 and 4. And if you are an even numbered house, like your number is 348, 350, you have different watering days than people who live on the other side of the street as you and may have the number of the house 349, 351. So they have water on opposite days. Irrigate with treated urban wastewater. Golf courses have started doing this because they get the water at a much discounted rate. But water that comes from a wastewater treatment facility, it's non-potable, meaning you can't drink it, but it's still good to irrigate with. Right? And then eventually as that non-potable water percolates through the soil, it's being cleansed naturally and then makes its way into the aquifer where it is now clean. Okay, so we have traditionally in the past just dug trenches and moved water through these trenches, right? Well, it's porous material and water drips down through those spaces. So what they've, in some areas have actually written into law and legislation, they line them with plastic and rubber so that way it cannot escape into the ground and percolate away. Drought-tolerant crops and plants, correct. And when we get to xeriscaping at the end, it'll be more about this topic. So what I was just talking about is digging those ditches with which to irrigate. That is called flood or gravity irrigation, right? So you either lose some to percolation into the ground, or you lose a lot to evaporation. So between the two, 60% of irrigated water used this way never reaches the targeted plants. And you can see what they do is they plant the plants in between them, right? And the water moves laterally through the soil and the plant's roots start to grow towards that water source. Center pivot. Notice the sprayer heads are pointed down instead of the big upright sprayers, right, which is very ineffective and inefficient. So in those systems, that would be an example of something that would lose 65 to 70% due to evaporation and just the wind blowing the mist particles away. We turn the sprayers down and it targets the plant. You have less of that overspray. And you get these cool little circles. Isn't that amazing? Drip or trickle irrigation is the most effective. Very, very costly, 90 to 95% efficient. Right? Water flows through perforated tubes directly to the plant roots. Some of them are even buried under the ground, so none is lost to evaporation. Or you can simply lay it across the surface, and it's still a much lower evaporation rate than in any other irrigation system. And only 1% of crop fields worldwide use this type of system, and that's because it's very expensive. So this would be one of those areas where the government could jump in and subsidize moving in this type of equipment, moving out the old equipment, and subsidizing the technology instead of the end product. In developing countries, right, they don't have the same type of equipment, so they have to be a little more inventive. So this right here is called a treadle pump, and you can see this guy using it right here. They go and drill a pump, and then they put these little, it's like a little Stairmaster, and they jump on there and they pump their legs up and down, and that pumps the water out of the aquifer so they can use it. Rainwater harvesting, rain barrels, collecting it just like we do here. Well, a lot of you, your parents may have a rain barrel or a cistern. Crop covers to cover the crops during the hottest part of the day, and it just blocks some of the sunlight off of them and slows down the transpiration, the movement of water through the plant. This last one is my favorite, called fog catcher nets. They put up these mesh screens, fine mesh, and it collects the morning dew. And the guy who invented this was inspired by when he was doing a trip over in a third world country. I believe he was one of the Engineers Without Borders guys. He saw how the dew collected on the spider's webs and thought, man, there's got to be some way to use this to collect water. At the bottom, they've got this little like PVC pipe, if you will, that's sliced and open, and it's capped on the two ends, and the water drips off the net into that pipe, and then they can go and collect it from a spout at the other end. How does industry use water? So 90% of industry water is consumed by chemical plants, paper plants, oil companies, coal companies, primary material extraction, so getting tin, aluminum, copper out of the ground, those types of facilities. And then food processing, those are the big ones. The steel company, though, has made great improvements on reusing their water. Right? So 95% of their water is constantly being reused, cleansed and reused on site. So there has been some improvement. In-home water use, single largest use of clean domestic water is flushing the toilets. Some of those people who collect rainwater in a rain barrel or cistern have actually connected it to their home pipes. So when they flush the toilet, the water is being pumped from the cistern, which is water they've collected from the roof of their house. And that's flushing the toilets instead of clean drinking water from the aquifer flushing the toilets. You can use drip irrigation on your lawns, xeriscaping, removing water-thirsty plants and just lawns altogether, getting rid of the grass, and replacing it with native, natural-looking plants. Completely changes the way your lawn looks, of course, but you're not using as much water and get kind of like a cool garden effect, you know? And then, let's see, recycle water for industry, like the steel plants are doing, the steel companies. Gray water, water from your shower, sinks, and dishwasher can then be used to flush your toilets. Or you can have it go out to water your lawns or even to your fruit trees if you have fruit trees. And you can always use that old saying, if it's yellow, let it mellow, and if it's brown, flush it down. Right? You can be into a toilet more than once before you need to flush it. But if it's poop, go ahead and flush it. So, if we raise the price of water, will it reduce use? And the answer to that is yes. Nobody wants to pay more for anything, of course, but the higher the cost of anything, the less of it we use. So we can reduce water use and waste by raising the price of water while providing low lifetime rates for the poor. Or lifeline rates for the poor. Okay, so what they're talking about there is they would keep the price low for people up to a certain number of gallons per month, right? So the average person uses X amount of gallons, right? So we'll give you that at a certain rate. Above that number, above X, then we're going to charge you a lot for that water. When Boulder, Colorado introduced water meters, water use per person dropped by 40%. A 10% increase in water prices cuts domestic use by 3 to 7%. So, yes, raise the water and we will use less of it. And that is the end of this unit. Actually, sorry, there's one more after this.